Hello everyone and welcome to Medicated Housewife DIY where crafting and mental health come together. My name is Sarah. In today's DIY video, we are making 3 sets of coasters using mostly Dollar Tree supplies. These gorgeous coasters made from tumbling tower blocks, wood cubes, wood beads, and Dollar Tree rope are as functional as they are beautiful. Quick and easy projects with a stylish and high-end look. You're gonna love them, so stick around and let's go make some stuff and jump right into this. To begin with, for DIY number 1, I'm using these small wood cubes that come in a pack from Dollar Tree. Each coaster has 6 rows across and 6 down for a total of 36 cubes in each, and we are making 2 coasters. I wanted to make several different colors of the cubes, so I divided the cubes into 6 groups of 12, plus a couple of extra cubes that were thrown in just in case. You can always make more colors if you want, or you can make less colors if you want. This project will work no matter how many different colors you use, so that's completely up to you. I did end up not using one of the colors, but you will see that later. I grabbed some acrylic paints, and I will link all the paints I used in the description box below. The first color I used was a Decor Raw Umber, which is a very cool toned brown, and I mixed that with plain water to thin it out because I am looking to do a color wash on all of these cubes. I just want a hint of the color coming through, so I paint one group of cubes with the raw umber and water. The second group of cubes, I used some Craft Smart gray acrylic paint. I also mixed that with water to create a color wash, and I painted the second group with that. I do paint all the sides of each of the cubes. Now, I did paint one of the groups with this folk art apple red, and I mixed that with some brown paint to darken it and some water, but I end up hating that color so much, so I don't use those cubes, and I painted some additional ones to replace them. I just left this footage in because I like to be real with you all. Next, I mixed some folk art decor antique wax with water, and I painted this group of cubes with that color wash. It's a much warmer brown than that cool toned raw umber that we used before. And again, I will link all of these paints for you below. Lastly, I mixed some apple barrel beachcomber beige with water to make this nice yellow toned color wash, and I painted a group of cubes with that. And as I said before, I hated those red colored cubes, so instead I replaced them with some natural unpainted cubes. And once all my colors were dry, I started to assemble them into a square 6x6 shape. And I wanted to be able to lay out every color exactly where I thought it'd look best. So I laid out both coasters in the color order that I wanted them to be. I used super glue, wood glue from Dollar Tree to glue all of my cubes together, keeping the color layout that I had already had out for both of my coasters. Off camera, once the glue had dried, I did lightly sand the top of each coaster, but not too much because the colors on them were already pretty faint and I didn't want to sand off all the color or anything like that. So I sanded gently and I coated the top of both coasters with Decor triple thick glaze. I will link that for you below. This sealed them and made them water resistant, and it also gave them a really nice glassy finish. And this is how DIY number 1, my wood cube coasters, turned out. I really like the subtle colors of the wood, and even though I like the glossy finish on these, I think you could also use a more matte sealer for a different look, if that's what you prefer. I'm thinking that the next time I do this, I might even use some grout in between the wood cubes, because the longer I look at them, the more they resemble tile or some kind of stone to me. At least that's what I think. I just know that these look so much more high-end than just $1, or in this case, $1.25 wood cubes. But I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments if these coasters have a higher-end stone look to you too. Or is it just me? DIY number 2 starts out with some Dollar Tree brown nautical rope. Now, there are 2 different nautical ropes from Dollar Tree. There's a brown and a white. For this part of DIY number 2, we are using this brown nautical rope, and we're simply rolling it into a disc shape and securing it with dabs of hot glue along the way. And as you can see me do that here, technically you can make this any size you want. You could even make it large enough to use as a trivet or a placemat, but we are making coasters, so I rolled this rope until it reached coaster size. Once it's the desired size, I turn it over and I use a generous amount of hot glue all over the bottom of the coaster. And this not only helps secure the rope together, but it also makes the bottom of the coaster nice and non-slip, so it really serves 2 purposes. Then I used the remaining brown rope and I rolled a second coaster the exact same way as I did the first one. So DIY number 2 actually has 2 different sets of coasters, but they are both the exact same concept, so I'm counting it as one DIY. But for this second part of the DIY number 2, we are rolling the white nautical rope from Dollar Tree, and we are rolling it in the exact same way as we did with the brown rope, using hot glue to secure it. And I'm going to make 2 of these white rope coasters as well. Going back to the brown rope coasters, I am using these medium-size wooden beads I get on Amazon in bulk. They're a good deal, and I will link them for you below. I counted out how many beads I needed to go around both of the brown rope coasters, and I put that amount of beads onto these skewers to make painting them easier. And I'm using a mixture of water and Waverly White chalk paint to whitewash the beads that are on the skewers. I then counted out how many beads I needed to go around the white rope coasters, and I put that amount of beads onto skewers to paint. I'm using Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in the color Cascade, which is a really nice chalky turquoise color, and I mixed that with water and painted the beads with the chalk paint mixture. I did end up doing a second coat on these beads because I wanted them to have a little bit more of that visible blue color. Going back to my white beads, I wanted to give them some distressed look, so I used a dry rough brush and some Deco Art antique wax, used very sparingly, and I roughly paint the beads until they look a little aged to me. I then turn around and do the same thing to the blue beads, but I use some Waverly White chalk paint to paint some distress onto these blue beads. I'm doing same technique, rough dry brush, and minimal amounts of the paint. Back to the brown coasters, I string the white beads onto 2 pieces of twine, and I use hot glue to hold the first bead in place on the twine, and I'm doing that by filling in that bead hole with hot glue. And I then begin attaching the beads one after the other with dabs of hot glue to the outside of that rope coaster until I get all the way around the coaster. Then I do the exact same thing with the blue beads. I string them onto twine. I fill the first bead hole with hot glue to hold it in place, and then glue each of those beads one after the other with dabs of hot glue around the entire white rope coaster, and then repeat the whole process for the second white rope coaster. And this is how DIY number 2, my nautical rope and wood bead coasters, turned out. Now, even though these are both made exactly the same, I think they are pretty much totally different styles. The brown rope and white bead, in my opinion, is very much a boho kind of a look, whereas the white rope and blue beads feel either beachy or coastal to me. I really like them both, and I'd also definitely consider making larger versions of both to use as trivets or possibly a placemat or table runner kind of a thing. It doesn't get any easier to make these, and really quick too, but I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments if you agree with me on the beachy, boho, and coastal styles. And what else would you do with these besides using them as coasters? DIY number 3 begins with 54 Dollar Tree tumbling tower blocks, and I broke them up into 3 groups of 18 so I could stain them 3 different colors. The first color I'm using is Minwax wood stain in the color Jacobine, which is a really nice dark brown, and I cover all the sides of the blocks, and then I use a dry paper towel to wipe away any of the excess stain and put them aside to dry. The second stain I used was Varathane wood stain in the color Ipswich Pine, which is more of a lighter goldeny brown type of color. I used that on the second group of the 18 blocks. The last color I used was Varathane wood stain in the color American Walnut, which is a much redder, almost burgundy type toned brown color, and then I let those dry. I knew I wanted to assemble my blocks staggered like bricks in groups of 3 blocks. I also wanted the colors to be as spread out as possible, so groups of 3 and 3 different colors means 3 possible variations in total, right? Let's just call that crafter's math, right? I'm going with that. So after laying out the color combinations in groups of 3 blocks, I glued them all into groups of 3, glued end to end, using quick and thick wood glue. I ended up only using 7 rows of 3 for each square coaster, so I did make more blocks than I actually needed, so just keep that in mind. So placing my 7 rows of 3 blocks, as I said earlier, I wanted them to be staggered like bricks. So I placed them in that formation, and I used pieces of painter's tape to mark off the piece that has to be cut off of each of those 3 block rows. And I did that for both of the coasters. I'm using my mini chop saw to cut the pieces off of the sides, and it's a handy little tool. I will link it for you below. You could also use a handsaw or miter shears, but to be completely honest, I just didn't have the hand strength in me that day to do that. So I went electric, well, mini electric anyway. With all my rows cut, it was time to glue the rows together. I'm using Tight Bond Quick and Thick, and I glue 7 rows together for each coaster and then let that fully dry. I'm using Folk Art Treasure Gold paint to paint the edges of both coasters. It took 2 coats for full coverage, and off camera, I gave the coasters a generous coat of Decor Triple Thick to seal them and to give them a really nice glossy shine. And this is how DIY number 3, my Jenga block brick coasters, turned out. I really like this color combination with these stains, and I actually really like them with a glossy finish. I think the gold edging just gives the coasters a little bit more of a finished, modern look. I really feel like these coasters are pretty modern for Jenga block DIY. However, if you gave them a matte finish and sanded the edges and then painted the edges black, you could make this a lot more rustic if that's your style. Let me know in the comments what you would do to these coasters to finish them. What changes would you make? And these are all 3 of my Dollar Tree coaster DIYs. I think you'd have to agree that they are all really quick and easy to make and easy to customize to your personal taste and style as well. Let me know in the comments which one is your favorite and why. I would love to hear from you. I hope you enjoyed this Medicated Housewife DIY, and if you did, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. It really helps out my channel. Once again, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm the Medicated Housewife, and crafting is my medication.